Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. And as part of that, it's actually part of education, it's part of learning. And we're going to have a person who's going to help us today understand what that looks like and how we actually get the books we depend on. So, as you know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, I advise companies with FDA regulated products. So, if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, or obsess over pharmacy, this is the podcast for you. I do have to specify I'm an attorney, but I'm not giving you legal advice. I am a pharmacist, but I'm not giving you clinical advice. And our guest today is a publisher, but they're not giving you publishing advice either. I do these video podcasts because they're a lot of fun and because I find myself learning something new every single time. But it would be nice to know if someone's actually listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. If you like what our guest is talking about, please feel free to reach out to her. And I'm going to put out her information as well. Please share this podcast, this live stream with people who might be interested. If you want to find me, you can reach out to Darshan Talks on Twitter or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's podcast is with a friend. She and I have been talking. She is amazingly gifted in publishing. She is someone I have come to depend on. She is also, and it's not something she had in her bio, but she's also a leadership coach and is incredibly smart about sort of helping you focus on the things that matter. So if you are in pharma, if you are a pharmacist, if you are in leadership, you should care about today's discussion. Our guest for today is a pharmacist, publishing professional, career coach, medical writer, editor, home chef, and a DEI advocate. And we're going to talk a little bit about what DEI means, because for some people, this is what they do for a living, and for other people, they're going, I have no idea what that means. So this is going to be a really, really cool conversation. Our guest for today, Dr. Janan Sarwar. Janan, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am excited to be here. We already have people excited to have you on. We've got Maria saying, woohoo, Janan. So, and we've got Augustine saying that. Like, everyone's excited to have you on. So thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for convincing me to do this. I'm excited to chat with you about whatever comes up today.
Yeah. So Janan, let's talk a little bit about just what this means. I called you a publishing professional. Talk to me a little bit about what that means. Like, obviously, there are a million different ways to publish. What have you worked on? What is the interestingest part of what's going on in the world right now?
Oh my God. Okay, so first, I guess let me explain who I am based on what you said and why publishing makes sense. Prior to last month, I was working at the American Pharmacists Association in the publishing division, in the books and digital publishing division. So I worked there for over 7 years, and amazing part of my life. The books behind me, let's see what I can point at. The ones like from that part to that part are all during my time that I was publishing. So around over 20 textbooks that I had some sort of role in publishing for pharmacists. So it was either for pharmacists, technicians, new practitioners, faculty, and I got to help make people's dreams come true. They would come to APHA with a book idea. Maybe they'd come, to someone at APHA, and then they'd meet us and my amazing past team. I miss you all very much. I know some of you are listening. So we worked together, and it start with an idea, and these pharmacists, these awesome people that I've worked with, would walk away maybe a year or 2 years later with a published book. So I had a really unique pharmacy experience to have that job, but I loved it very much. I can't hear you anymore. Oh.
To quote our guest, to quote Megan Smith, that's amazing, Janan. And I actually have to agree with her. So I am super, super excited to have you on because we get to talk a little bit about this. So you've been part of 20 textbooks. So let's start talking about how you make these dreams come true. So when you talk about textbooks, the first thing that comes to mind is how do you choose which textbooks get published? When is the topic too broad? When is the topic too narrow? When is the topic timing not right? Like, how do you decide that, make that decision?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something that you have a strategy in any publisher, which we'll talk about, I'm sure later, that what I want to do, even though I don't work in that publishing job, I am trying to start and open a nonprofit publishing press. But that's for another time. To answer your question about textbooks and how do you decide, or any kind of book, first of all, there has to be a strategy. And of course, strategies need to align with the mission and vision of wherever you are, the publishing house. So at APHA, we did have a really beautiful mission statement related to making sure that we created resources that would, find a way to meet the learners where they needed to be. A lot of times we decided between print and actually making a book digital on our platform. And I say I don't work there anymore, but on pharmacylibrary.com. And we're learning now that the behaviors of consumers and pharmacists and everyone is changing. A lot part due to COVID, and then just in general, publishing's changing in that books in print, textbooks and things like that, people don't really buy that anymore. Or, I can admit, prior to joining APHA, I had roommates back in pharmacy school, and maybe we would buy one copy and share it whenever needed. So that's one of the examples of the way that print books, the way it used to be maybe 10, 15 years ago, specifically with text books, are declining. And pharmacists these days, did we lose Darshan?
No, I'm still here.
Okay. Pharmacists these days are, finding ways to get information in other ways. For example, the access to information on websites like UpToDate, or even quick Google searching, or nowadays CE companies, which I now work for one. I work for No Fully Learning Group in the CMEO division. And at CMEO, there's ways to basically get continuing medical and pharmacy and healthcare practitioner education out there to pharmacists, doctors, nurses, everyone. And the education is free because those are grant funded usually by pharma. And just going back to my bio, you said a lot of things about me. Thank you. Those are a lot of titles, but really, I'm just lucky to have had all of those positions and roles. And right now, just to speak to the writing, that's why I call myself a medical writer. I do grant writing, and I'm a medical resource manager at CMEO now. I know I completely went on, but does that answer your question about following strategies? So the strategy with my global book publishing publication house is going to have a completely different strategy related to getting books and about people around the world, authentic sources, to people around the world as well.
So it's interesting you talk about this, right? You talk about this idea that you came from a knowledge base around health, and you and I have had multiple discussions about this offline, about how health is a core component of what you're going to be focusing on as you continue with your path. So when you make some of the decisions you made, you said are strategy based. How do you even begin developing that strategy? Do you start off by saying, you know what, here's a need and I'm going to try to meet the need? Or is it better to go, I will create the need because there's complete lack of education on what this actually means? And how do you sort of begin to explore that?
That's even better question. Getting back to the topic at hand related to acquisitions. You're basically saying, how do you decide what to acquire for a business or any entity? And
yes, that is what I said, all smart like.
So, how do you decide? Do you create the need, or do you see what people say? And I think it's a little bit of both. And actually, Darshan, that's how you and I met. You were on one of our, I was leading a focus group, and I didn't lead it. I was listening in, so I didn't do much talking, but it was about cannabis. And wondering whether APHA should start publishing resources about medical cannabis. And you were there, and there were a lot of other amazing thought leaders that joined, and you gave a lot of great suggestions, because that's one of those, not yet do we know if there's a real need, and maybe a percentage of people that we do surveys at APHA and other places I've worked. There's a lot of market research involved, trying to get the pulse on what do people want, specifically asking questions. what kind of books do you think would you buy? How much would you pay? I mean, we really were trying, because of that concern about people not wanting to buy books anymore, we needed to decide, is it even worth publishing? So I would say times have changed with publishing. Maybe before it was a little more based on here's what we think the needs are. And then as I've evolved as the senior director of the book department, I thought it was really, really important to know a little bit of both, to kind of balance, where do people want us to go? What are the up and coming topics? Because then that's how you can be innovative and a pioneer and a leader.
So that's actually a great point, right? You're talking about doing this market research. And as you're doing this market research, have you found audiobooks sort of taking a bigger role? If so, do I see a future where my textbook is an audio? Or are there different types of learners who need different modalities, and how does that play out?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. I have tried to follow up with the data and the research on this because prior to getting my amazing job at APHA, at UNC, I did a fellowship in educational technology research and development. That's a fancy way of saying, at the time I had a PharmD, they needed someone to kind of go between these actual experts, which were our faculty, and the students and the people who would create these materials. And what I mean by materials, I mean, we at UNC during my fellowship created what I ended up doing more extensively later in my life at APHA, but a digital platform where maybe if you're trying to learn biostatistics, instead of having to go to a textbook and read, I helped work with the professor and we created a module. We created videos. I got to do some voiceover, some editing, and I worked with graphic designers, illustrators, instructional designers to learn. It's that whole idea of how do people learn. So you're right, there are absolutely different learning modalities. And interestingly enough, a lot of the places, Larissa is where I worked with her, and so you're the best too. You were the instructional designer that taught me, what does an instructional designer do? They're the people that are the go-between between Einstein and the student that's reading Einstein's book, somebody to translate this complicated thing. And so the result can come in multiple formats. Maybe some things are meant to be a textbook. Maybe something would be better to be a video for 5 minutes. Maybe something should be TikTok, and I will learn it because I'm so tired from work that I only have 30 seconds or less than 3 minutes to learn something. So Laura, you're absolutely right. DePiro on audio is something that they should do. If you're listening, you should do it. Now, APHA, what I helped create, Pharmacotherapy First, which is existing, and you guys should check it out. It is the how do you get the information you need to know when you need it, Cliff Notes version of pharmacotherapy. So again, shouting out to all the people that I've worked with to help make that come true. That exists, trying to see that, 100 pages of chronic kidney disease, can we just watch a video? Then why reinvent the wheel? Can we just go to YouTube and find a really well done video that the NIH did or something and learn it from there? Reputable resources and getting all that together. So, yeah.
So it sounds, and Jonathan's sort of highlighting this idea, as are you. You're talking about this multiple format approach. I've written books and I've written book chapters, and my experience is that you're spending so much time writing these books out.
Right.
It's very resource heavy, but at least it's finite. On the other hand, when you start using multiple formats like video and audio, it's really difficult to start splicing things out and adding new videos. You almost need to start from scratch every single time for the other formats compared to a written format. So how is budget a major concern, or do you find you get a much bigger audience and therefore it becomes easier to pull people in?
That's the question of the day, ROI. How do you prove the return on investment? And that's something that anybody who's going into this world saying, I think videos and all of these are a great idea. Of course, it's a great idea. Of course, people may even watch it. But the big question is, are they willing enough to watch it to choose that over print, or to choose your product that has all these multiple formats over something they can hobble together without paying. So people will love things. There's a difference between loving something and actually investing in it, right? So
100%. So are there surveys out there? Have you got, when you worked at your last job, are there surveys that you conducted that asked that question? And what made them, if you did, what made them unclear? Because obviously you guys haven't gone down that path, but it's something you've explored because it's an issue that keeps coming up. So where were you? How did that sort of play itself out?
Yeah, shout out to the editorial advisory board. That's a member. There's like, I think at least 6 people from different forms of and places in pharmacy, whether it's a student pharmacist, new practitioner, someone working in pharma, someone working in hospital, clinical, academia. And we would, have intensive meetings with them at the annual meeting and thereafter to kind of discuss, okay, here's the reality. What do you all think? Can you ask the people that you work with? A lot of times authors would come with a very clear vision of how something should be. And so, you have to make those publishing decisions of, do we go that direction? Because that's what the author knows is right. Do we take the direction that we know the business needs to go? I mean, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, and that is part, yes, the editorial advisory board, and then the group that I worked with in books and digital publishing, we would make those kinds of decisions. But of course, it always ends up of what, senior leaders and others want. So those are good questions. I think that there's really an exciting place that education's going. And the most exciting thing is we learn the most from what K through 12 is doing and what they're going through. K through 12 education, it's kind of like the testing ground. And what in educational, what I learned so far in educational theory and all of that is that our brains, the way we learn, the way we, will retain information, you can test it on younger kids and apply it in higher education. There are pedagogy conferences and all this for all that. And they talk about that, yeah, you can apply those theories and actually, it works. And I was involved at UNC where I was. Adam Persky was one of the thought leaders as well who would, think about these things. How do students learn? So he actually tested, I think my class, half of us got an online version to learn pharmacokinetics, and the other half got a spiral bound notebook kind of thing. And yeah, it's really interesting, the results. Sometimes it's good. I'm not saying technology is the answer. Sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not. But again, it's a lot to unlearn, discover and unearth.
Well, but that's the interesting part, right? It's someone like you who's actually been in the publishing space, who's asked these questions, and sometimes the answer isn't the only answer, but it was the right answer for you at that moment, which is where the educational experience comes in. But one of the things you said 2 different things that I really want to explore. The first thing you said was that you asked the authors, which I think sounds great in concept, but I've been the author and I'm kind of going, I'm 20 years out of pharmacy school. I'm 15 years out of law school. Am I the right person to ask how learners learn today? I mean, I still continue to teach, and I'm visiting professor, I think, still at the University of the Sciences, and I'm going to be teaching at Drexel Law starting. Sorry about my dog. Starting very quickly, but the point is, I'm teaching what I'm comfortable with, not necessarily how the student needs to learn. And I need to always actively remember that I need to put myself in their shoes. So is it always the best practice to be asking old fuddy-duddies like myself? I don't know if people use that term anymore, but what is the right path? Or should you be asking the audience? On the other hand, there is I forget there was a saying I remember, which is Henry Ford said that if you asked people what they wanted, they would have said faster horses. So how do you make that decision of, is this faster horses, or do we need to cater to the audience?
Great question. So I'm going to ask you, depending on the book, who is the fuddy-duddy? If the fuddy-duddy is the audience, then 100% I need to know what you know. So for example, if you told me, Janan, I really want to publish a book that is for pharmacists that are lawyers too. And so then at that point, it would make 100% sense for me to say, okay, what would you want? What would your friends want? What would the target audience want? And yes, I say shoot for the moon for everything. Like, let's dream big, and let's dream the best. And then let's look at reality. You know, if you dream and you know the craziest it could be, let's budget for that. And then say, okay, it's easier to have a long list and break and cut things off. You've heard that in writing. It's also with lists. It's easier to cross things off than to later get somewhere where you're like, oh, I wish this really would have been cool if we had this like part where I talk to my friends that are both lawyers and pharmacists, and we have a conversation in the middle of this book. Janan, can you do that? And of course, if we talked about it in the beginning, I would have said, yeah, we just add a QR code and we budget for this. But if you figure that out later, it's not as easy. So yeah, I think you're right. Absolutely, the answer of what do you publish these days, it's what the audience is going to buy. But the audience differs. For APHA, is our audience, students? Well, then the answer's still not what do the students want. You know who you have to ask?
The teachers.
Yeah, because there's the ones who's going to assign it. So it's still, you got to please all audiences. And then it's not just what the faculty wants. Will the school, the administrator, maybe it's the librarian that's responsible for allocating budgets that year, will they want your product? That's the question you have to ask.
Which is so interesting. And I'm going to ask the next question, which is so interesting to me again. It's this idea that you're testing this in younger students and younger kids, K through 12, if you will. And I know you're doing some work in that space. So hopefully we'll get to that today, but I have a feeling there's just so much to explore here. We'll have to we'll have to eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Sure.
But talking about younger kids, one of the things you mentioned was the idea of TikTok. Do I see a future where I'm being taught infectious diseases in 30-second bites via TikTok?
People are doing it. People are doing it. The company that I work for, again, CMEO, you can put that up, KLG. Shout out to those who came from there. They're talking about, I was just on a conversation yesterday about launching the TikTok page. And I thought it was a joke, but it's real. And I think that's amazing. You've got different demographics of people. We have, as I mentioned, now I have not practiced in pharmacy. I'm not a doctor, but I know people who are like, they're working so hard during the day. It's what I mentioned earlier. Do you want to then have to watch a CE that's like an hour long and take notes and have to answer questions? Or is there another way to deliver that CE through a podcast, through a short video, through an Instagram takeover, through a podcast like we're doing right now? That's what the smart companies are doing. And that's what I'm seeing. And it's really exciting. It's very cool. I think that there's a future for that. Maybe not for you, but maybe for the generation that, and maybe not for me. I'm too old for TikTok, they say, but I'm familiar with it. And if someone sends me something cool, I watch it. I love it. I watch it again. I save it. I mean, I love it. So yeah, there's a future.
I mean, I'm almost wondering if there's going to be a future where my book chapter is taught, and then I get into Clubhouse and have a conversation with the author about what that book chapter was. Learning infectious diseases from DePuro. I don't know if DePuro teaches ID, but whatever he does could be mind-blowing to realize you have access to that author in a completely different way.
You just brought up something that literally relates to my dream of, as far as children's publishing, but I've learned the world is so small, especially because of the pandemic. We are able, and then so Lynette is talking about microlearning. Absolutely. Microlearning is so relevant, and the ability to connect with someone, whether they're around the world, whether they're a celebrity, whether they're, the professor, it is more accessible now because people can just walk out, turn on their webcam. They don't have to change out of their pajama bottoms and then talk to you, and yes, we really need a way that we can bring. And so my dream is Sheetal Sheth. We talked about her. My daughter and I read one of her books. She just published a book series called Anjali. It's published by Mango and Marigold Press. And I really look up to that press because they're focusing on South Asian writers. And I've met other publishers all through social media in my free time, literally before having to pick up the kids from school, or when I wake up in the morning early before everyone else. I'm on Instagram and I'm learning through hashtags. I'm connecting. This podcast that we have had zero, and that's called Salam Storytime, if anyone wants to check it out. That's Lena, my 5-year-old daughter's idea of finding a way to spend more time with me, and we've succeeded. It's on anywhere you listen to podcasts, but what are we doing with Salam Storytime, and why do we have Salam Storytime? It's a way to bring kids together to learn that kids around the world, regardless of any disability, your skin color, your age, your height, no matter what, you are important. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to have stories written about you by people like you. So authentic voices, our voices. We need diverse books. I'm actually just quoting hashtags, which is why I sound silly, but these are all true statements. And it's those kinds of hashtags that I'm using to find people. And so since we launched the podcast in July with zero marketing dollars and just my experience of how to use audio, remember I mentioned I did voiceovers when I was in pharmacy at the UNC, using those skills, I edited the podcast, we added some music from free websites, and it's been listened to in over 14 countries just because of Instagram and the internet, because the world is small. I really believe that.
Which is so cool. I'm sorry, I keep coming back to just microlearning as we're talking about it. The past has always been, I remember going to pharmacy school and the whole argument was textbooks are so expensive.
Right.
I'm wondering if the future is textbooks are free, because it's going to be in these different microlearning formats, and what you pay for is a subscription to it.
Absolutely.
But is that something that's being taken seriously, or is that disruptive and people are not willing to take the chance to go down that path?
So there are people that are doing this. There are companies. I met someone really exciting. I don't know if you know him, Scott Kjelson. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Kjelson. He works for a company, I think it's called, I forget the name, but it's adaptive learning for textbooks. It's translating your textbook into different modalities to meet the different learners where they need to be. So it's not, there are several companies already doing that. That's instructional technology, instructional design. I think that is the future. And what we have learned is that learners aren't just one kind. Like, you can't just say, I only learn things when I draw them or when I see them. We're all a little bit of everything. And there's a lot of research, and I'm not an expert, but I think that is a great future where you can see that you get the textbook, or you purchase, or you have this free, the core, something like, maybe it's an outline, and then you can choose. And maybe it is the same thing in multiple formats, just because that's how you learn. You learn first when you read it and you understand it, but to actually, Bloom's level of taxonomy, how do you actually apply? How can you synthesize information? And, those words, those terms, I'm sure you're aware, like, how do we really, when you do any of your CEs, how are we meeting those learning objective goals? Those are the questions. And I think people are trying to be creative in how they deliver that material. And that's the future.
This is such a cool conversation. But Janan, the truth is, as you know, I aim these to be about 15 to 20 minutes. We'll really double that time.
Okay.
It is so fun talking to you, and there's so much information you have. So before we continue, we do have to say a couple of different things. So first of all, John, just to remind everyone, how can people reach you?
Yeah, so I'm starting this global nonprofit. I am putting it out into the world, and Global Bookshelves is the name. Reach me at this email address, globalbookshelves@gmail.com. I have a virtual assistant helping me. You can follow me on LinkedIn and message me there. I'll try to get back to you. I love, thanks Laura for helping spread the word. I love how organically things are growing. And I'm actually doing a speech for another group called Giving Back to Pharmacy in Pakistan, which I met from someone who connected to me on LinkedIn. But I'm doing a talk there in September on the value of making meaningful connections. Like, what does networking really mean? Maybe it's because I'm a mom of 3 little girls. The pandemic didn't really change much for me. I was always just, we were home. I'm very voyeuristic in watching as my sister-in-law and other, amazing people are traveling the world. I can't do that. I'm home. And so what it did was just help me realize that you have to cultivate these connections, the internet, our phones, but then do it with a balance. Because I think going too extreme either way, you have to have some disconnection. You have to have time with books. You have to have time to make sure you know how to make meaningful connections with the people in front of you too.
It's amazing. So thank you for that. As you know, I'm going to ask you a few different questions. My first question to you is, based on what we've discussed, what would you like to ask the audience?
What have you read lately that's inspired you? What have you? Yeah, that's my question. You can answer. Or just, what do you like to read? What do you enjoy reading? Those are my big questions.
So I try to answer my first question. I try to answer the question to just get everyone going. But
yeah.
I just landed up. So I don't read as much because I literally do that for a living. So I try to listen to audiobooks. And I just listened to The Martian again, which is really, really cool. I love the idea of the science being based in a story format, which I really wish more readers would go down, or more writers would go down, more authors would go down. But to me, that was a really fun format. Sort of pulled me into the conversation. They talked about obviously all this different science and this physics, and I'd say probably about 95% of it went completely over my head. But just the idea that you could think through these huge problems in bite-sized formats really sort of inspired me. And then talking about bite-sized solutions, and then realizing that there are bite-sized ways of giving that information, like you just discussed, was really, really interesting to me. So thank you. So that would be my answer. If other people have answers, here's one. Jonathan Little comes back with $100 Startup by Chris Gellibo, I guess. And I don't know how to pronounce the last name, but that's another one. So thank you, Jonathan. And I think that's kind of interesting. Here's another question for you. Based on the last, oh, here we go. We have another one. Jesse's responded. Clara and the Sun. So that's kind of interesting as well. Love to sort of explore why each of these. So obviously Jonathan's more in the startup mode, while Clara and the Sun, I expect, is more of a leisurely read, I expect. So always fun to sort of explore what people are going through right now. So my question for you is, based on the last month, what's something you've learned that you'd like to share with the audience?
Something I've learned. Okay, so, and it's interesting, Jesse just spoke. Jesse told me a story. I worked with him, and he told me a story about the one thing his mom made him do every day that maybe, I don't know if he loved it at the time, but it's the one advice that he appreciates. And what Jesse's mom made him do every day was read. And I got inspired by Jesse. He told me the story when my youngest one was younger, or my oldest one was younger. And I was like, yeah, we have to read every day. And so it's a ritual of our family to pick books off the shelf and read before bedtime. And what I learned, I didn't learn that in the last month. What I learned in the last month is that there's a nonprofit organization called Read Aloud. And they said that if you read to a child from birth until like forever, whenever is your end of having a child, 15 minutes a day, it will increase their knowledge. It'll increase their vocabulary. It's free. Reading is free. What's the one thing we can do every day? And so I already kind of knew that. But what I didn't know, and I want to share with you all, is that I didn't know I was going to be able to say that I think you need to read every day, but you need to read books that help you learn about who you are, and you need to read books about other people as well. That's the thing that I've really learned. Yeah.
So what I really have realized then is I need to really focus more of my reading on Real Housewives of Orange County, because I really need to bone up on my pop culture references. So
it doesn't mean read you can read the back of a cereal box. You can read a magazine. That's when I say like reading. I know a lot of people, and thanks Thedra for your response. They're quoting like awesome books, which are really amazing. Make It Stick is a really good one. I do a lot of, in my spare time, I do read a lot of like productivity books, but then I also have cookbooks that I'll just stare at and get inspired and turn and read, actually. And there's cookbooks with stories these days that are coming out that, so when I say read, it doesn't mean like 15 minutes. It's kind of like an apple a day keeps the doctor away. Read, we should come up with a rhyme that it sounds like the apple one, but reading at least 15 minutes about anything, actually finding something that's fun to read, will just make you so much happier, smarter. Read. That's my takeaway.
It's funny you say that, though, because you talked about this idea of, and you sort of briefly glanced at it. I'm not even 100% sure you actually intended to say it, but you talked about combining storytelling with cooking and with food.
Yeah.
I don't follow those blogs almost ever, but I will say that I've always heard that people are now complaining when the food recipe blogs start off with a story at the top, and they're just going, please don't give me the story, just give me the recipe.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that can, so, and again, I would put that maybe in a QR code. So if you really wanted to read that, you can go online. No, I'm kidding. Yes, that is a pet peeve of mine too, with internet recipes. But actually, a pro tip I just learned, because I had to submit some recipes for something recently. The pro tip is when you go to those blogs where you have to go forever, typically at the top, there's a little button that says jump to recipe. Click that next time. Click that, and you can bypass the story. It'll take you right to the box where the ingredients and the steps are.
Which is really cool. I've never even heard of that. So as you know, the last question I'm going to ask you is, what is something that made you happy in the last week?
Okay, do you go to Target? Do you like Target?
I do. It's sad. That and Facebook Marketplace, but yes.
Target gets me every time. So we went as a family. That was our outing. We don't travel. We go to Target. When you have 3 kids, 5 and under, Target it's an adventure and a getaway. But we were at the dollar spot, and we bought this, like, in the $1 section, this pot that said, it had seeds and everything. And so the next day we did an activity with the girls of like, let's plant this and talk about seeds and kindness and all of that. Tried to make it fun. And this morning, because the girls were helping me make the shelves, put the colors back where they were put on the floor. They were helping, and they saw something. They saw this plant, the pot, and then Lena looked inside, and I took a picture of this because it made me so happy. What had nothing in it, I don't know if you can see, it sprouted. Oh, can you see? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. There's sprouts. There's green there's no flowers yet, but it bloomed, so that made me happy. That they were like, there's nothing there. And they were so excited to see that something we did like a week ago, with a little water and a little love, something happened. So I just love that. I think I just, kind of think about that quote of, you never know, plant seeds, be kind to people. You never know how it may come back. I'm seeing it now. I did all these random things in my life, and we talk about this, like, what's your why? What's your purpose? I'm still not exactly sure, but I have this feeling now that all the random things, the fact that I like photography, and the fact that I liked, doing all these random things related to book publishing, and I'm a pharmacist. Well, now I want to create this global publishing press that brings people together for healthcare, because there's cultural sensitivities there, children, so they can know that we all, regardless of how tall we are, what cloth we wear, we have the same feelings inside. We need the same things, which is belongingness, love, and then the last one, food. So you mentioned food. I love food. We can bring together people with food too.
Which is totally awesome. And that's such a great way to end this. Obviously, Janan, we would love to have you back, because that was a lot of fun. For those people who missed it, you can actually reach out to Janan at globalbookshelves@gmail.com. And Janan, this was amazing. And thank you everyone for participating. It was amazing to have you guys on. I hope you guys come back again. We are going to have Janan again if she's open to it. So we would be very excited, Janan, if you consider coming back.
Thank you. That would be great. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.